Welcome to our joint webinar, Future-Proof FP&A, Make Your Financial Planning Fit for the Future. Joint webinar between Board and BDG. Today I have invited Christian Kiock, a managing partner at Better Decision Group, in short BDG. My name is Björn Maas. I'm Director of Financial Solutions at Board for the region DACH. And actually it's more Christian that invited me because this is a BDG webinar. So glad to be here.
Welcome, Björn. Thanks for coming.
And before we start with the content, some general information. All your microphones are muted so that we don't have any interferences. But please use the opportunity to ask questions via text. On the right-hand side, we will collect them during the webinar and answer them, if possible, during the time of this, the running time of this webinar, or afterwards. In any case, you will get your answer. And we will also have a poll at the end for feedback so that we can improve our webinars further and further. And with that being said, Board and BDG has a long-standing partnership. So for more than 12 years now, BDG works together with Board in different countries. We have a close partnership and numerous successful projects, different industries, but also different functional areas. Mainly Office of Finance, but also towards operational planning and everything that flows into it. And BDG has been awarded as the winner for the Board Solution Partner Challenge and with the Solution Implementation Award. Correct me if I'm wrong, Christian, this is for the BDG One People application.
That's correct, yes.
Board, on the other hand, we are a globally active CPM software vendor. We are active in 19 countries. We have 25 offices around the world, partner landscape with 150 plus partners, implementation and consulting. And we have more than 2,000 customers worldwide. We have a really close partnership with Microsoft, which shows itself in the connectors, also the cloud environment we are using, and even in joint events. We are recognized as a leader by the most influential analysts, that being Gartner in North America and BARC more in Europe in the DACH region. And here we have been recognized as a leader in the planning quadrant several years in a row. Now, Christian, would you be so kind and briefly explain BDG at a glance?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So BDG, in a nutshell, I think it's firstly starts to say by saying that we've about 80 people in the team right now. Last year we turned over about 11.5 million euros. We have 5 locations. We're headquartered in Berlin. We have another office in Germany, which is in Dortmund, and we have an office near Zurich, and 2 in the UK in Manchester and in Peterborough. We have 3 main software partners, so we're partners with different software companies. So we've got a bit of a obviously good view of the market and sort of individual strengths and weaknesses of software tools. So we're obviously software agnostic in that respect. And finally, I think the 2 figures you can see, which are annual figures for last year, the number of active clients over the course of the year and the number of active projects. So there's roughly a ratio of 3 to 1. What does that mean? That means 2 things, really. Firstly, it means that our customers are happy with us and want to continue working with us and come back, which obviously is great and makes us very happy. But also very importantly, what that means is that the solutions like Board are modular, and that you start with a quick project, a quick first module, and you get value very quickly of the solution, and then you can add to it over time, rather than you having to lock yourself away for months and months on end and sort of come back with a big bang solution. You can get very quick time to value and then add modular solutions as you go along.
Great. then what makes the Office of Finance future-proof, Christian?
Yeah, so, okay. I suppose, obviously, that's the question we are all asking ourselves. Clearly, there's a lot that could be said about that. We could be talking about this for 2 hours just on this particular slide. Obviously, I'm going to try and keep myself to a couple of minutes just. So you may have heard of the VUCA concept, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. That has been around for many years. Sadly, because of increasing complexity and the speed of change accelerating even faster, and this has now been replaced with the BANI concept or BANI concept, brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible. A model that sadly even better reflects our rather chaotic world that we're finding ourselves in. Obviously, that's from technological change. That's unfortunately some geopolitical change that we have all witnessed in recent years, and so on and so forth. The idea, of course, is for the company to be to have creative resilience, to be better prepared to respond to changing environments. And obviously, the Office of Finance is right at the core of that. So the help of tools around modern analytics tools, IT-based solutions that help you around that, to ultimately identify opportunities and risks, and to enable yourselves to have a better precision in trying to forecast. Ultimately, that's what it's really about. That's what everybody's striving for. Obviously, AI gives you an edge in that, and tools like Board that are very open to all sorts of AI solutions. Board have had their own AI module for many years now, but they are very open to industry and technology leading solutions. So lots of APIs that can be used for that. So ultimately, obviously, we want to be more agile in our planning. We want to increase our forecasting precision. Ultimately, we are in a process that is just starting to develop to more autonomous finance. Autonomous finance is really the step to have self-learning agents that will be better and better positioned to do repetitive tasks, but even with a certain level of self-learning capacity. This is not really what we're seeing today, but this is the sort of more the direction of travel. But obviously, anything that can be automated, where users don't have to do repetitive manual tasks that the solution can do for them, that's really where value can be added and time can be saved. And that's what we'll see just in a moment when we go into the demo. It's worth to say your own data is your key advantage. You still have to ask the right questions. You still need your people to interpret the data the right way. So we won't be superfluous just yet. Tools can only do so much. And especially it's important to make the most use of your own data that you have available. So that's really something that I think is a key point to making sure that we're becoming more future-proof.
Thanks, Christian. And now let me briefly, let's say, map out this solution within the Board cosmos. So what we see here on this slide is an overview of what Board can do within the CPM, EPM space. So within corporate performance management or enterprise performance management, which is ultimately driven by finance, but also operational figures, operational planning flows into your financial planning. And here you can see Board offers everything starting from data collection, structured data collection over a web portal for various reasons, be it financials, non-financials. And within this Board platform, and it's still one software piece, regardless of the use case, we offer our GCR consolidation solution. So GCR standing for Group Consolidation and Reporting, which enables you to do legal consolidation, but also managerial consolidations using various dimensions outside of the core financial dimensions, but also enables you to do plan consolidations. This is flanked by topics that are usually adjacent to consolidation, which are tax reporting, but also ESG reporting, which could also be placed here in the data collection part. But ultimately, this GCR consolidation solution on the board platform offers a robust core, and itself is more closed because it's driven by legal requirements, and it's also certified. So here we are in a more standardized approach. In the financial planning part, we are still quite standardized. But the more we go towards the operational planning, more and more it's based on the business model of the customer, and there we need the flexibility. And BDG and other partners here are actually in a sweet spot because they have the combination of the board platform power, the solutions we as board, like GCR, offer, but have also access to their own solutions they develop on the board platform based on the experience from different projects. And with that being said, let's briefly elaborate what is actually a solution in our context, because it's a word we use quite often. But a solution delivers in the end a business outcome for a use case. We say within our solution taxonomy, so that when we as board talk with our partners, but also with our customers, that we talk about the same thing. Then a solution is a set of reusable assets to promote, sell, implement, deliver use cases, and ultimately knowledge, best practices. And here it's really important for me to stress this point. So we will see later an asset from BDG One Finance, but it's not just this technical asset. There's also an ecosystem of experts around the documentation, best practices, and project methodology. So a solution is much more than just a piece of software. And with that being said, maybe you can briefly introduce the advantages of the Board Intelligent platform with BDG One Finance.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I think as we already heard just now, standardized planning, reporting, and analysis in that particular process of integrated financial planning, which is very standardized and very consistent across different areas, different businesses and different industries. Really, we've been doing this for 15 years, 12 years with boards, 15 years in total EPM and CPM projects. So as you can imagine, a lot of those were in FP&A and a lot of those were in integrated financial planning. So we have a lot of understanding of recurring requirements. So therefore, really that's the idea to make sure that 90% of that is already there. It's already implemented, and then you can have very, very quick time to value. That also means it's not only quick in terms of time, but it's obviously quick in terms of effort, which means less costs. So that's obviously great. And then you have the transparency through the integration of individual planning modules, which you can always add to it, as we saw earlier. So that you can always add to it as you go along, and where you need to be more specific to your specific requirements, and then obviously adapt and scale as you go along.
Great. Then since we are within the platform, and I mentioned it before that we have the possibility to address several use cases. Can you maybe map out the BDG Finance, BDG One Finance solution in conjunction with other use cases, and especially the BDG One People solution?
Yeah, sure. So I think, as you say, I mean, finance obviously is usually at the heart of it, and everything sort of converges in the finance function as we know it, as you will well know. You're living it, so to speak. So therefore, it's important to have this central block, this central element of the finance function. However, of course, around the finance function in the business, there are lots of other departments, lots of other areas of the organization that really see themselves facing the very similar problems. One of them in particular, which also is, of course, a very important function for the business, is HR. In most of your businesses, people will be the biggest cost block, but it's also the most important asset that you have. And so therefore that needs to be managed properly and well, especially in conjunction with the finance function ultimately. So therefore that's why we said, okay, we have the VDG1 approach, which basically means this 90% predefined productized content, which still has the advantage of Board with the full flexibility, so we can still do everything that we want, but we get this very quick time to value, and the costs are obviously a lot more attractive. We have the same for finance as we do for people. Today we will focus on finance. There is another webinar, there's more content on our website, etc., around the people side of things, which again is another area that obviously needs to be managed properly. There are other use cases. There are also industry-specific use cases, especially with Board. One of the areas is retail. Another one is manufacturing around S&OP. That's other areas that Board and BDG are very strong at. But as far as the horizontal business functions are concerned, finance and people are the two ones that we have focused on initially, and that we have developed solutions like that. Here you can see the finance side of things. Obviously, this list is not exhaustive, so there are other elements that, of course, you can do, but this is sort of the core of what we wanted to cover on the finance side, with those honeycombs that you can see there. On the left-hand side, the bottom, you can see various different data sources, whichever they are. There's not a data source that we haven't been able to implement and integrate into Board in all the years of working with them. So any data source and many data sources, any and many, that's important. So you can have various data sources, not a problem, and Board will be totally open to those. And then, of course, at the top left there, you see collaboration functionality around commenting, around workflows, tasks, and so on and so forth. All of that is standard functionality in Board, and is really Board's home turf as well. We are now going to head into the demo.
Great. Really looking forward to the demo, where you combine the experience from different projects, the solutionized approach with the standard functionalities that you just mentioned before. And let's dive into it.
Okay, so without further ado, let's jump into the demo. So as you can see here, this is in a web browser. Everything's web-based in Board, and you can use this on your laptop, on a mobile device, or on any device really, as Board is based on HTML5 technology, which means the screen will always adjust to the size. The content will adjust to the size of the screen. So you see this wheel here, finance, of course, being in the middle, as we discussed. And so I'm going to jump right in. And here you can see this is the sort of the overview of the start screen. The key bit here, obviously, is the fundamentals of finance. So where we have the fundamental integrated planning process, starting with CapEx through a P&L and balance sheet into a cash flow. You've got some dashboards up here, which I'll show in a minute. And of course, there are lots of other modules. We talked about Board being modular. There's lots of modules that you can add to this. So there's an intercompany reconciliation. There's a group consolidation and reporting module from Board for legal consolidation. There's working capital loans, and so on and so forth. We're not going to go into any of that today. We're going to focus on the fundamentals of finance, and I'm going to give you a bit of an overview over the process right now. So the way this is structured is it consists of these main 4 bits. And in fact, I'm going to start with this overview because this has slightly less text. So as we saw on the earlier screen, on the previous screen, it starts with CapEx. It goes into the P&L balance sheet, and then the cash flow from there. The idea here is that we have account mappings and we have drivers. And these basically make sure that we automate as much as we can of the process.
And so the way it works is that we have account mappings, which you will see later on, of how certain CapEx and depreciation figures flow into the P&L and from there on into the balance sheet. And also then we have drivers for the calculation of the balance sheet and drivers for the cash flow. The idea there being that while everyone needs a balance sheet, most companies, as far as we are concerned, and from our experience of having done this for nearly 20 years and therefore hundreds and hundreds of times, is that most companies don't really spend much time on planning a balance sheet, and it's just one of those things that has to be done. So therefore, we have automated that process through drivers and mappings, and so therefore the balance sheet doesn't need any inputs. It's basically entirely calculated based on the inputs you do in the CapEx on the P&L module. And then you get a cash flow, which of course you can then make adjustments to as well if you want. There's a dashboard, which you'll see in a minute. Obviously, Board, and that's, I think, is very important to note when it comes to reporting, it's very, very versatile. So you can do lots of reporting if you need. Certainly, we would always suggest that a reporting requirement that is close to the planning process and that you would probably want to see during the planning process, visual aids will help with the planning process as well. Even if you already have a planning tool, that's quite a helpful feature to have. So even if you already have a reporting tool in your company, it's quite a useful feature to have a good reporting functionality also on the planning tool for that reason. And then the black bits that you can see, that's the admin capsule. I already mentioned drivers and mappings. There's obviously also security around it. Who can see what, who can write what. So for example, cost center managers can only see their own figures, for example. Obviously, all of that can be managed there. And then there's also, very important for any planning process, there's a workflow that gives you the visibility of who's already started, who's already finished their workflow, their planning processes, but also gives you control of once the planning process is finished, you can't open it again without the rights to do that, and so on and so forth. So this is the overview, and obviously we're going to walk through that now. So I talked about dashboards, just to give you an example of one dashboard and how that could look like. So here we have a very, very high level P&L. Down there we have it broken down a bit further. You can see on the top right-hand side, I can have this in millions, I can have this in thousands, or I can have it in the original figures. So maybe you will do the thousands here, just as by way of an example. Obviously, here you have different comparison versions. You have your previous year actuals, you have comparison versions which you can choose, and then you have different deltas, absolute figures, relative figures, and so on and so forth. And that can then be analyzed. This is just, like I said, an example. You'll see many more reports. Board is also very good with lots of different diagram types, with lots of different chart types, and so on and so forth. So all of that is available this year, just as a quick overview. So then we go into the CapEx module, which is where we'll start our journey. And so the idea here is that we, for the purposes of this example, we have assumed that the investment initiative is planned and already set up in your ERP system. So therefore, we would load all of those from the system, which you see on this button up here, load master data. So you load the master data, which would obviously be your account structure, your general ledgers, your cost centers, and all of those things, but also your investment initiatives and measures. So you can see here that we have different levels of hierarchy. It says hardware, it says software. Underneath that, you have other groupings, and then you have the base level, the individual initiatives. Again, all of this structure can be loaded via master data, and that would be done on the button up here. So you then have your different initiatives. So therefore, you would also already know which cost center they belong to, and the investment reason as well. Those are already there, so we cannot actually change those in this particular example because they're white. All the yellow bits we can actually change. So what we can then change is the investment class. So for example, if something changes and it needs to be put to a different investment class, then you can do that here. You can either save data entry, or you can also tick this little box up here, or you can undo if you made a mistake. So let me just undo this here. And then obviously you have the project start and the project end. You have an investment sum. You may already know a supplier if that's relevant for this particular investment initiative. And then obviously you can put that in as well. And as always, and everywhere in Board, you can put comments in as well. You see up here, these two are already white, so they also can't be changed anymore. Why is that? Because they've already been submitted, as you can see here on the workflow column. As I mentioned, workflow is very important for any planning process. And that's already input in the BDG1 Finance, because as we mentioned, a lot of the recurring requirements we've already put in there. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel every single time. Workflow is a standard feature that you'll want in every planning process. So we've got that in there. In fact, we've got a multi-stage planning process in there. You can see up here, you've got approval, approval mid, approval top, we called it, just for the purposes of the demo. So there's 3 levels of approval. And then basically, obviously, if you need more, we can always add more. If you only need 2, if you only need 1 level of approval, then of course, we can leave out the other levels as well. But as a standard and from experience, we find that usually the levels 2 and 3 will be sufficient for you. So you can then see here that now, obviously, they can either approve these things and so on and so forth. But we're not going to go into that. Here, this is the first level. So here, the first level, obviously, if something is submitted, then you can decide to either approve something or reject something, and then it would be promoted to the mid-level. So obviously, if I go to the mid-level, you can see here, no action is possible yet because it hasn't actually been promoted to this level yet. So therefore, you can't do anything because you would, first of all, have to decide on the first level of approval whether you want to approve something or reject something. But that's just by way of example. Let's go back to the actual CapEx calculation. So as we go to the CapEx distribution tab, you can see that the calculation is being done on the depreciation. This is obviously something, and the writing off period, basically, amortization period of these individual investments. This is calculated based on the investment class that we set on the first tab. So just to reiterate, so basically the duration of how many months this is then split. Therefore, that's basically being calculated based on the investment class. I mean, the depreciation is tied to that. The CapEx distribution, of course, here, this is what you can see tied to the project start and project end. So, for example, if I were to extend this out a little bit to say this is actually a project that's a 4-month project, then I can always recalculate this. And then it'll ask me whether I just want to use the normal calculation. In fact, if I just press calculate, it'll just normal linear calculation, or I can distribute it according to different other distributions. So I could say there's a key here. So for example, if I go here, then it says linear, increasing, decreasing, 60, 30, 10, 4, 5, 4, and so on and so forth. And I can actually add more of those as well if I want to. I'll show you that in a minute in the config screen. But that's how I can add different other progressive, degressive, and what other methods I want if I don't want to do this in a linear fashion. The way this would work is if I click up here, and then that would take me to the admin section, which I'll just do now. This opens in a new screen, and you can see here now I could define, if I wanted to define certain other drivers. You can see up here, I can add a new member, which would give me the ability to plan another distribution key, for example. So if I click on here, then I could add something to that list of elements and go from there. But this is just by way of example. So I'm going to go back to my planning screen. And as you can see here, I increased the duration to 4 months. So obviously now I get 2,500 each month. I can still make manual changes if I want to. So if I just do this, by way of an example. So if I do this now and I say save data entry, what's going to happen now is that the solution will tell me, hang on, now you actually have a deviation from the original investment sum that you entered. So therefore, there's now a red light here. You can't actually press update, so you can't actually take this any further, because obviously now there's an issue to be resolved. And then from there, you can go further, but obviously I'm just going to take you through the process now. You have an annual overview of the CapEx. You have an overview of your depreciation. Like I mentioned, that is tied to the investment class and the length of duration. And then obviously you have a monthly overview of this as well. This will then be forwarded on to the P&L by way of mappings, which I will show you now. So this is a mapping screen. As you can see here, this is multi-language. So the GL chart of accounts actually is German in this case. You'll see in a minute how obviously we can translate this to English and to any other language as well. So you'll see in a minute this exact chart of accounts is going to be in English on all the screens we see. You see it here in English, but actually it can be multi-language as well. And you see how the assignment accounts, how that is mapped to depreciation accounts in the P&L, to balance sheet accounts, and so on and so forth. So obviously this can be changed. This is something that we will set up with you initially, but if then something changes over time, then obviously you can change these things here yourself. And this is all in the front end. This is done by end users. Obviously you wouldn't let every single end user onto this screen because they might inadvertently break things. But it's also not something that you have to do somewhere deep in database settings with IT administrator rights or whatever. This is actually all done in the front end. And so this is the way it works. I'm gonna jump back to the planning screen now. So I've finished this process, and now I want to go to the P&L. So I'll jump back here and I'll click on the P&L bit. And here, straight away, we have a number of things. So basically, we have three main screens for the P&L planning. You can see that up here. We have the initialization screen, where we sort of very, very high level take a view and then break it down further. And then we can either plan by cost type, so one cost type across all my cost centers. Typical example of that would be IT, for example, where you plan some IT costs centrally, but you have to plan them across different cost centers, for example. And the main one then is where you as a cost center owner, for example, plan your cost center across all the different accounts, which we will see in a minute. And again, as we already seen before, we have a 3-level review process. So again, the workflow that I've shown you earlier in the investment CapEx piece as well. Again, you've got your original, you've got your thousands, you've got your millions, so you can choose all of those as well. And then here on the left-hand side, you have a very high-level view of your P&L, obviously very much aggregated. And so you can choose a comparison version. So up here, you can choose the comparison that you want to compare against. So obviously all of your different forecasts, your different rolling forecasts, if you have them, your different end-of-year forecasts, obviously your different budget versions, which you may have planned over the years. And you can choose which one you want to use. And then obviously you have a very high level P&L plan, which gets seeded based on something that you choose, which is actually up here. So you can typically say initialize previous year plus X%, and the X% is then you put that in here. Or you could say I want to initialize a previous plan, so I might go from my last forecast, or I might go from my last year's plan, but I do want to just add 3% onto everything. And then obviously you can do that here. You can also, up here, you can see you can clear your budget, you can load actuals. If you want to have more up-to-date actuals in here, of course you can do that. And then up here, you've got load sales data. That's basically just an example. We talked about the modularity of planning in Board. And so this obviously is where it all ultimately ends up. But we've seen in the wheel that on the start screen that I sort of show you right at the beginning of this demo, that obviously there are other departments that would have their individual planning processes. Typically, sales planning is obviously a big one that's being done in more detail. HR planning tends to be another one. Again, there's a module for that BDG1 people, which goes into much more detail on that, and that's sort of more or less pre-built as well, just like we are seeing here in the finance space. And obviously, you would load this data, you would aggregate it, push it into your P&L. You would still, obviously, in the individual planning module, keep that level of data and that level of detail that you did in the planning and had in the planning process. But you can, of course, then feed this here into your P&L, so you don't have to type, copy and paste, or replan anything here. So what we've done, as you can see here, the P&L plan was actually based on previous year figures, and then if you compare that with previous figures, you can now obviously make those changes. And the interesting thing here is that you can actually go and have comparisons in all sorts of different ways. So, for example, you can say, well, I just want to type in a number here. So I want to make this around 195 million, for example. So you can type the number directly into there. Or you could have said inc 10, which means increase 10 by 10%, or dec as in decrease by 10%. All of those shortcuts you can put in there straight away. You can also say, well, actually, I'm more interested in my delta against my previous year because I want to overachieve my trading revenue against my previous year by 4%. So then you can put this in here. So this is like an inverse algorithm. So you could either change the number here, or you could change it here, or indeed, you can say, well, actually, I'm more interested against my in how I'm doing against my comparison version, which obviously in this case is a massive difference. So I want to do 100% against that. And that's obviously something, as you all know, in Excel, this would be a cell reference problem, a circular reference problem. But you can actually enter into all of those three cells, and the resulting cells will calculate automatically. And that's obviously something you can do. You can do all over the place. You could also go and say, well, I want to go into a lock and spread. What is what this is called. So this is basically just something that gives you a planning wizard, where if you don't want to use those shortcuts straight on the screen, then you can also say, well, actually, I would like to add a certain figure to this, or I would like to subtract or multiply, or would like linear growth or percentage growth. Also, you can then go in and say, obviously, collapse and expand these groups, and so on and so forth. So there's lots of functionality here, which you can also use if you want to use the wizard, or you can just immediately plan on the screen. So, okay, this is the high-level view, and you've got some diagrams here on the right-hand side. Again, just an example of diagram types that are available here in Board, but that basically helps you to visualize what you are planning. Then obviously now we go into the more detailed level of planning, which is the cost type planning and the cost center planning. So this is what I meant. This is one cost type across different cost centers. So you can see here, there's a number of cost centers here. You can, of course, select a lot more cost centers. So in this particular example, we have 301 cost centers. These are obviously just examples. So you could plan across different cost centers or different cost center groups. And as you can see, you've got accounts, you've got accounting areas, you've got cost types, and so on and so forth. So there's lots of different levels of hierarchy and different ways to sort of manage your data. The main one, as I mentioned, is probably this view where we say, I will plan for my cost center or my 2 or 3 cost centers that I'm responsible for. And I will actually go and plan all of my accounts on here. And you can see this is now more extended, but I can actually also go in and say, well, I want to go into even more detail on this. So I want to drill, and I might want to go to my account level. And then you can see there's underlying accounts there that you can then go to, and you can drill to the lowest level and actually also plan on the lowest level if you want to. And so yeah, so that is that, and obviously you can here enter the numbers. You see that the first 5 months here are already actual months. So basically, we're not planning this. This is like an example for a rolling forecast, where you only plan from June onwards, and then obviously just for the rest of the year. We can also have rolling forecasts over 18 months, and so on and so forth. And then you make your changes And again, you review. You can then use the workflow process, and so on and so forth. So that's basically the P&L bit. And now we're running out of time a little bit, so I just want to briefly show you the balance sheet and the cash flow. As I mentioned, the balance sheet is calculated entirely based on those drivers and those mappings. And I've showed you the mappings before, and now I just want to show you the drivers real quick. So I'm going to go to my admin capsule again. And here you can see the different types of drivers. So again, we've just put in a few by way of an example. So you've got your basic drivers. You've got your delta drivers, which means the delta drivers is basically that the value that you put in here is entered or obviously subtracted as a delta from the opening balance. You've got your closing balance drivers. Obviously, as the name would suggest, these values are added to the closing balance as opposed to the opening balance. And then you've got your P&L input ones. Those are then drivers for the cash flow calculation. So you have day sales outstanding, receivables, turnover, and so on and so forth, DSO, DPO, all of those kind of things, which of course you do that then, which you need then to calculate your cash flow statement. And again, just a few examples here. You can add more drivers, just like I showed you earlier when it came to the different distribution keys. So again, you can just add a new driver and obviously then populate that. Down here, you can then say that whether you want the drivers to be used for all of the accounts or maybe just for some. So just by way of an example, really quickly. So the real estate ones, if you go to all of these accounts, you can see all of these are ticked apart from the temporary one, which in this case, again, just by way of an example, isn't ticked. So you can even go into more detail. Most companies don't actually need that, but you can go even into more detail in making sure that the mapping works exactly for you and that all the values will flow where you need them to flow. So this is the mappings bit, which again, like I said, the top ones are obviously relevant for the balance sheet and the ones down here for the cash flow. So I'll jump back to the balance sheet. And as I mentioned, you could then click here, load balance sheet. All of the calculations that are being done based on the mappings, based on the drivers. And then obviously it will always make sure that the balance actually balances as well, which is of course rather important. So that works as well. And then you've got here the green buttons which say change in stock compared to previous months. So that's just a little bit of visual information to point that out. But very importantly, you can see all of these cells are white, so I cannot actually input here. This is only calculated. I'm not going to be inputting anything here. And then finally, I will go to the cash flow. And this is the cash flow statement that is then calculated based on the drivers and the mappings again. Here also, for now, it is white, but we've added something here, which is this element up here, which is data source. So the thing about this is that you can actually see where values are coming from. So whether they're coming from CapEx, for P&L, maybe from the people element, i.e. the HR planning, if you have one, or a sales planning. Again, these are examples, or a procurement plan. Whether they might come from your SAP. SAP in this case just stands as an example for your ERP system, whichever it might be. Or indeed, you have the input one. And input basically means you have to, this is just a bit of like a security setting. You actually have to choose the input data source to be able to now, as you can see, it's now all yellow again, apart from working capital, which remains locked. You can't change that. That you can now actually make inputs here and make changes. So that's more of a way to make sure that you really are being very deliberate about this and can't just type things in. And again, we don't have to have this. This is just an example, but we find it's quite helpful to make sure that there's people don't inadvertently put something in that I didn't mean to. And of course, you can see where changes might have actually come from which other module, if you just choose these individual modules. Okay, so that brings us back to the main screen. Like I said, there's way more things we could be showing you around dashboards and reporting facilities and so on and so forth. But today, this was the focus, the fundamentals of finance. There's other things, of course, which you can add to this. I mentioned it at the beginning, consolidation, intercompany reconciliation, all of these sort of things. Obviously, other modules as well, like the BDG1 people, the HR planning module that I mentioned. Again, that would be another topic for another webinar, which, of course, we would love to welcome you to. There's sales planning, there's operational planning, all sorts of things that you can do and connect up to this. But the key fundamental financial process is put here. And as we said, basically 90% there, we would just adjust this to your specific requirements. With that, let me thank you for your kind attention, and I'll hand over back to you, Björn.
Great. Thanks a lot, Christian. Always a pleasure to see you in action. After this demo, could you maybe tell us the main points? What is the real benefit of the BDG1 finance solution, and what does make it future-proof? Why is it future-proof FP&A?
Sure, yeah, of course. So as I mentioned, the modular integration, of course, department-specific modules, you've seen even the icon here, it's a honeycomb, it can be integrated. I think we've mentioned that several times. Productization in inverted commas, though, as I said, it's not a product that sort of ties you into what you then basically take it or leave it. This is what you have to take. You still have the advantage of being flexible and being very specific to your specific requirements. However, you have a 90% solution that's already there, and that obviously gives you very fast time to value, which we already mentioned a couple of times as well. As I mentioned, we have got a lot of best practices across the years. That's been all of that's been poured into the BDG1, got it to where it is now, really, over 15 years. Because we have 90% is always the same, a 90% standard, obviously, we can implement very quickly, which means high quality as well, less testing, of course, because we know what we're doing. We have done it many, many times. So implementation standards are very good for quality and speed of implementation as well. And finally, of course, coaching and support is available. Again, because it is standardized, we have tried and tested that as well. And so therefore we can support you on your self-service journey, which, as I mentioned, is one of the great strengths of Board, to be as independent really from external consultancy. Of course, we will always be happy to support you, but really the direction of travel in the industry is that you are as independent and autonomous as possible, and really that will enable you to do just that.
Awesome, thanks. Then let's jump into the questions. I've seen it here in the chat. Some have posted questions during the webinar. I don't think we have the time to answer all of them, but we will get back to you via email or any other channel afterwards. But if it's okay for you, Christian, I would just pick out one or two of these questions that I deem interesting.
Cool. Yeah.
Here is one question where someone asks, I get that you standardize a solution, especially within the Office of Finance, because most of the things are the same or is standard. But don't you cut off features within Board, or basically the vast possibilities of Board? Is that not a little bit going into the opposite direction with a standard approach with an application solution? Okay.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and of course a valid one, possibly from an existing customer. Yes, the advantage, of course, is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. However, as I think I was trying to point out as well on the final slide just now, so I assume the question was probably asked before that. You have the full advantage of the full flexibility. So I showed earlier in the live demo that you have different capsules in Board, which effectively are the apps. And you can see how those work together, and you can have various capsules working together into one unified solution. And so if all else fails, and that sounds a lot more dramatic than it is, because that's very easy to do in Board, we just have a capsule for your specific requirements that you want to do and want to use. Not a problem. But even the existing capsules, as you've seen them today, as a 90% solution that's already there, even those are flexible to be changed. And so therefore, I mean, obviously, I'd be very happy to have a conversation with you about your specific requirements and your specific concerns, but I can 99.99% guarantee that is not a problem, and we can absolutely extend the solution to cover those requirements as well. That's not a problem. The flexibility is still there.
Yeah, I think I can mirror that thought also with our own solutions. I mean, of course, there's standardized approaches, best practices, especially within the Office of Finance, that don't need to be recreated every time. But a solution, especially a Board solution, grows with the customer. So I think it makes a lot of sense to start with the standardized approach, but still be open for more specific use cases that are more tailor-made to the customer. And this is and has always been the sweet spot of Board. Maybe one more question, Christian, which someone asked here, and it's also, to be honest, also quite interesting for me. How does it actually work in practice with the, let's say, BDG One Finance? If we just assume standard, just customization of the application as it is with your own chart of accounts and so on, no tailor-made developments. Is there a rough estimate in man days that you can give how long it takes to implement it?
Yeah, sure. So the one thing I would say is that we basically always have the data integration side of things. So whoever's ever implemented, anyone who's ever implemented an IT solution knows data integration is obviously very specific. It depends on where your data is, how clean it is, etc. So that one, obviously, we would have to look at. But apart from that, we are looking at roughly 40 days, which can be done in a matter of weeks, which obviously also means that it's not just quicker, but it's also a lot cheaper. As you can imagine, we've developed this over many, many years with hundreds and hundreds of man days have gone into this. And so obviously now the benefit for you is that we basically get this up and running for you in, like I said, a matter of weeks. It's quite cheap as well. So therefore, that's basically the benefit of this software module that we have developed.
Okay, great. And you don't close the door for future improvements or anything else with that approach?
Of course, absolutely. We continue to develop it, and of course, our customers will be benefiting from that as well.
Great. Then, thank you very much, Christian, for presenting BDG One Finance. Thank you very much for everyone that has listened in and watched our webinar. We will try to answer all your questions via email or any other channel afterwards. But please don't hesitate to get in direct contact with us, either with Christian or myself. If you want to get in contact with BDG or Board, via email, LinkedIn, whatever, we are happy to assist. And one little favor to ask at the end. Again, like I mentioned at the very beginning, we have a poll functionality for feedback for our webinar. And we really need that kind of feedback to improve our webinars in the future, tailor it more to what you need. More software, less software, longer, shorter, whatever you have in mind. We appreciate your feedback.
Yeah.
And thanks a lot.
Thank you.